Hi there, Lindsay here, sitting here with Mark Naylor. Some of you may know Mark. Mark attends our CPC campus, and I'll let him just explain a little bit more about who he is.
Okay, I work with Fellowship International and with Northwest Baptist Seminary. So my role in that is the training and development of our missionaries around the world with Fellowship International. I and my wife Karen were missionaries in Pakistan for 14 years, and currently I continue to go back and forth to Pakistan to do the Bible translation work.
Right. One of Mark's sons, Matt, is a member of our church. As a matter of fact, in June was voted in to be on the servant leadership team.
Yeah, I'm proud of him.
And so he should be.
Yeah.
The reason I'm doing this little video today is Mark has had a conversation with me over the last couple of years about significant conversations.
Capital S, capital C.
There you go.
Yeah.
Can you maybe just explain a little bit about that?
Well, what Significant Conversations is, how it started was when we came back from Pakistan in 1999, 2000, that we had spent all that time in Pakistan. And Pakistan is a place where you can have significant conversations about spiritual things really easily. Evangelism is easily done there. People live in the presence of God, they think about God, they speak about God, and you have conversations about God, you have conversations about Jesus very easily. When we came back to Canada, we found it was a totally different scenario.
Yeah.
That God is not part of the conversations. People do not walk around being aware they're in the presence of God. Jesus is not part of what they talk about. In fact, there's a narrative that says you do not talk about religious things, you just make it a private thing.
Right.
And so it was very, the transition for us was very difficult because when we came back, we were in the mode, that's what you talk about, and it was very awkward. Mm-hmm. And we said, something's wrong, we need to do this differently.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, I think we all get it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've been here. I've never lived in an area where it's as open to be able to have those conversations as you, and I'm very intrigued. So maybe just tell us a little bit more about what Significant Conversations is. I mean, we're not talking about strictly a teaching thing. We're not talking about an every week thing. We're talking, if I understand you right, a little bit of coaching. And
the idea is coaching is when we came back and we figured out that, what we need to do is we need to contextualize how we talk about our faith. It needs to be contextualized, just as we did it in Pakistan, needs to be done here, that there are ways to talk about your faith that makes it comfortable, that makes it safe, that makes it so that both parties say, hey, that was a great conversation, let's do that again, rather than alienating people, making people feel uncomfortable, and having people avoid you. There's ways to do it, and so that's what we studied, that's what we worked on, and that's what we laid out with this Significant Conversation. There are tools that people can use so that they can have what we are calling significant conversations. Now, the point of Significant Conversations is, this is not saying this is how you do witnessing. This is not saying this is how you explain the gospel. What we are saying is there are ways that you can engage in conversation with people that will allow you go to a significant depth rather than a shallow depth of just talking about the environment or just talking about what you do or what you've done or the sports you've seen or the shows you've seen on TV
bike lanes,
whatever,
the ferries,
yes,
all these things we like to rail against,
yes.
The Malahat.
Yeah, the things that are the popular conversation topics that are just the things in the environment or things that we do. But when you get down to the deeper levels, things about values, what people actually value, what they think is good, what they think is bad, what they actually believe in, and then what their worldview is, how they think reality really is. How do you get down to there? Because if you can get down to there, and it's interesting that this is something we talk about in Significant Conversations, people do express their values. Well, when people express values that are opposed to my values, how do I respond to that? How do I respond to that so there is a positive reaction rather than a negative reaction? Either people are uncomfortable, they avoid us, or we have a negative reaction and we stop talking and we avoid the issue ourselves because we don't want to be uncomfortable, we don't want to destroy the relationship.
Right.
Well, there are ways to deal with that so that we can talk at a deeper level and have a significant conversation and makes it comfortable and people want to have more of that.
you're saying that, it sounds like we're trying to communicate in such a way that we're actually respecting the other person.
Respecting the other person, making it safe,
Yeah.
so that they can say what they say, so that we can say what we say, and what we wanna say, but in a way which is not confrontational, which does not try to control the other person, very anti-Canadian ways of thinking. So we wanna do it in a Canadian way, but in a way that gives them space to say what they think, us space to say what we think, but we're talking on a deeper, significant level.
Okay.
Because the thing is, if we can get things down to a significant level, that if we are followers of Christ and we're talking about what's significant, we're gonna talk about Jesus. If when we talk about significant things, we don't talk about Jesus, the problem is not that we don't have a package to share with people, it's the
Right.
problem is with us.
Right,
But if we are followers of Jesus, then how do we talk about Jesus?
yeah,
In a way that makes sense.
yeah. Sounds good, I like it. You're talking about, or I mentioned earlier, coaching.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I mentioned, but this idea that there'd be this gathering together, possibly every 4 or 5 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
where then others are there, sitting around tables. Maybe explain that just a little bit.
Yeah, what we've done in the past is in working with a church, working with a group of small groups in a church. And the idea is to do that once in a while, like once a month, once every 6 weeks. And the groups take time out of their regular studies and their regular meeting times, come together, and we do coaching about this. And we talk about what significant conversations is, giving tools that people can practice, that people can talk about, that they can pray together, all these different ways that a group can grab this idea of significant conversations, work on it individually, talk about it corporately, and develop that kind of environment which makes it possible for them to have the significant conversation with people that they have never been able to have conversations with before.
Yeah. You mentioned when we've met a few times, there's a little bit of an acrostic or an acronym that you use to sort of explain. Can you share with us that?
Yeah, so the acronym is SISSY,
Okay.
because this is kind of a sissy way to do evangelism, okay? It is, seriously it is, because this is not something for evangelists.
Right.
If people are evangelists, they don't need to have this coaching. They're already doing it. I've had evangelists come to these coaching things and they go, well, this is just what you do. And it's like, well, if you got it already figured out, you don't need to be here. It's for the rest of us. I mean, I do these things because I'm not an evangelist.
Right.
I need these tools in order to know how to open up the conversation so that we can have these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And when I do the coaching, I give all these stories about conversations I've had, not because I'm a brilliant evangelist, because I'm not, but because I've used these tools, and also boom, things open up and it's like, wow, this is amazing that people are willing and wanting to talk about these things, and all I did was make it a safe place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, so what are the
Sissy.
4 things?
Yeah.
The sissies. Okay, I gotta make sure I remember what they are and
Yeah,
get
I
the
got it right
you
here.
got it
I'll
right
correct
there.
you.
Okay. Because the first one is support.
Right.
And
Yep.
the idea of support here is that we are a very individualistic society, so we tend to think, oh, evangelism is what I do, right? I come together to worship with other believers, and then I go off and I gotta do evangelism by myself.
Right.
But what I argue is no, we need to do this corporately. We need
Right.
to be what we are doing and how we are engaging people outside of the walls of our Christian safe places. It's a dangerous thing, it's a difficult thing. We are going to hit our head against the wall. And so what we need is we need the support and the prayers and the guidance and the encouragement of others as we seek to engage people in significant conversations. So that's the first one,
Yeah, support. Yeah.
So the second is intentionality.
Right.
And when I say intentionality, I'm not talking about intentionally giving people a gospel message or intentionally talking about Jesus. No, the point is intentionally noticing when God gives us an invitation into somebody's life and being able to speak into it. When somebody intentionally puts up a bubble, so rather than ignoring it, we address it. Or rather intentionally putting up a bubble ourselves and seeing how people respond.
Yeah.
And we talk about bubbles, and we talk about these invitations.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could give one illustration. Let me give one illustration.
Sure.
Because what I mean by intentionality is that in one group that we're doing coaching in, and the fellow says to me, says, well, he says, if somebody wants to have a significant conversation, I can have it, but I don't want to initiate anything. I said, okay, well, let's pray then that God will give you an invitation that you will notice and you will say, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to respond to that.
Okay.
So he's a carpenter.
Yeah.
The next day, he gives me a phone call. And he says, you'll never guess what happened today. I said, what? He said, I was up on a ladder and I was fixing something on the roof, and the guy lay on the floor. He was laying on the floor. And all of a sudden he says to me, he says, hey, Jim, you a preacher? I said, what? Where did that come? He said, no, I'm not a preacher. What do you say? I said, just something about you, the way you talk or whatever, it's different. He said, and we got into this conversation.
Wow.
So it's like,
Yeah.
we're praying for invitations and God gives invitations.
Yeah.
So that's part of it.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned in our coffee time and in some of the notes that you'd sent me that this is presuming
Yeah.
that God is actually at work.
This is
He's
presuming
going before
God's
us.
absolutely.
That He
That's-
actually cares.
That's a big part of this.
And He does, yeah.
And so that's why prayer is a big part of this.
Yeah.
And we're praying intentionally that God will give us invitations, and we're intentionally looking for them. And when we intentionally look for them, we see them and we respond to them.
Yeah.
That's the intentionality right there.
Yeah, yeah,
And then the third is significant conversation, so SIS.
Yeah.
And then the last is impact. What we
Okay.
look for is impact. What we're not saying is that whenever you have a significant conversation, people are going to come to faith, but they are going to start thinking more. They're going to start on a journey. They're going to think about things. I mean, maybe they'll think about things in a very different way. They'll go on a spiritual journey and they'll become Buddhists or something. That happens. But what it means is that their head is now in a different space, and they're much more willing to engage and continue on those significant conversations. I have a friend in Pakistan, been my friend for 30 years, and he's a very strong Sufi. But every time we get together, we have deep spiritual conversations. And when he tells me Sufi stuff, I say, well, that's what Jesus is like. And I show him something. He goes, wow, every time you say something, you show me something that's like in the Bible, what
Yeah.
Jesus said. And I said, yeah, because Jesus is the source.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you come to that level and you start having those conversations, it begins to snowball. You begin to be able to have them more comfortably,
Yeah.
more easily, and more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this because this is certainly something I've heard over the years in just talking with people, having coffees with people. The struggle, they want to share their faith.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to be offensive, like you said, we're good
Exactly.
Canadians.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they also know that being Canadian means there is this wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to this. Well, if you were there on Sunday, you heard our dream for the fall. We're looking for God to do something that, frankly, in the 30 years of ministry, I've never seen. We're taking seriously the call to be disciple makers, to be those who really do love our neighbors, both in action and in word. And so what I'm looking for from you as leaders, from you as group attendees and people in community is, would you be willing to come and journey with us on this? This is something I've never done before. I'm looking forward to it. I think it can help me. I think it can help you. So thank you for taking a few minutes to follow this. Thank you, Mark,
Hey,
for
you're
being
welcome.
part. This is awesome.
Be
I
glad
look
to
forward to
help.
hearing back from you. God bless.